Get on the train before it leaves the station. The truth train is coming, gonna run them down, run them down.
Hello there, everybody. How you doing? We're here today to talk about Brendan, but in the process of talking about Brendan, we're going to talk about really why the agents of the state of Wisconsin, particularly with this case, cannot be trusted, and why it's impossible to believe their, claims of doing nothing wrong, or that Stephen Avery's guilty, and we're all just making mountains out of molehills, right? Well, I don't think that's true because there's so many things. And I only have to look at one stat, really. One stat kind of sums it all up. And that is the fact that two items have been remanded back to the circuit court in Stephen Avery's case from the Court of Appeals. And that is a rarity. It's only happened happened a handful of times in Wisconsin's history. And it's now happened twice in one case. So that right alone tells me that there's something not right. It's a pretty big indicator if that's happened now twice in one case when it barely ever happens. So that's one thing. Anyway, we're going to be talking about Brendan. We're going to be talking about, the implications of just how widespread there was clearly a bias against Avery. And I think the thing that proves that most of all, or at least best, there's enough for us to look at and see and really be able to know that there was shady doings, is Len Kachinsky. Okay? This is an agent that is supposed to be Brendan Dassey's lawyer and looking after Brendan Dassey's interests. Okay? That's his job. And we know what he did. He brought in O'Kelly. All that. We know what Len did. It's ridiculous. And he was kicked off. He was kicked off as the case as Brendan's attorney. Okay? Even Judge Fox was like, "Holy crap, man," and had to boot him. So what does that tell you? I mean, there's a lot of things that it might tell you, but I'm gonna go ahead and let you listen to this particular clip because it shows, number one, that Len he's in it all just for the attention, and that's why he probably decided to take this case. And he knows the cameras are there to talk to him, and he is beaming with excitement to talk to the cameras, to deliver this horrible news for Brendan. And then he goes on to say a few other things in terms of a plea deal and what could happen and that sort of stuff. So here we go.
Everybody good?
Yep. All set. Yep.
What are your thoughts after today?
Well, we're disappointed in... start over. We're disappointed in Judge Fox's ruling. I guess we'll take a case the way the facts come in, and Brendan and I will be discussing the various options we've got in this case sometime next week.
But are you anticipating having Brendan testify against Stephen Avery?
It's always a possibility that he might. Anytime you've got a situation like this, I guess that's a decision Brendan and I have to talk over next week. If there was a plea agreement made, Brendan certainly would be required to testify truthfully against Steve Avery. So we want to look at all the options before making any final decision. This is an extremely important decision that a 16-year-old's going to have to make. I can give him advice, but ultimately it's his decision.
Okay, first off, how do you like the bit at the beginning where he starts off and stumbles, but it's live, and he's like, "Let me start over," and then he starts over again, and remember how I said he was beaming? I mean, what do you think? Anyway, to deliver this terrible news, and then we all know what ends up happening. Okay, you heard him saying there, it's up to the 16-year-old to make. I can advise him, or this or that, but it's up to him to make. I mean, did you hear all the things he was saying? Key in on the one particular thing where he said, if he does make a plea deal, he will be required to testify at Stephen Avery's trial truthfully. Okay? That was his own choice of word. Okay? And what it means is he believes that Brendan did it. He believes Stephen's guilty, and he believes Brendan did it. And that's Brendan's lawyer. Because to say he would be expected, for him to add the word truthfully, okay, indicates that Len believes that he knows what the truth is here. That's what it indicates. And by him saying that, he's indicating that he believes there's a truth here and that Brendan should tell it. Okay? Regardless of the fact that it's against his client's own interest. That's the trippy part. I mean, that little bit kind of sums up a lot of what's wrong with Len Kachinsky and a lot of what's wrong with the legal representation that Brendan was afforded. I mean, the first lawyer basically waived his right to like a preliminary hearing to see if there was enough evidence to whatever. His first lawyer just kind of waived that and then walked off into the sunset. Turned out he was a family member of the Hallbox. He was related to him. So then he's gone. Boom, after doing that. Then Len comes in. And then Len and Michael O'Kelly do their little voodoo, all their little voodoo on Brendan. And force him to fill out that form and all these things. And, O'Kelly's got all those props laid out in front of him so that he can try to, use it as emotional, leverage against Brendan and things like that. I mean, all the things. And then to send him back to Wiegert and Fassbender again. And then that's where Wiegert and Fassbender get the great idea to threaten him and say that they'll tell his mom that he did all this if he doesn't tell her first. Which means calling on the prison phone and it being recorded for them to use at trial. Tricking this 16-year-old kid yet again. So, talking about Wiegert, let's take a little clip of Wiegert here from Brendan's trial. By the way, the attorney here talking or questioning Mark Wiegert is Fallon. Tom Fallon, yes. Oh, he's a beaut. I've covered him in other videos. He's the guy in the closing arguments of Brendan's trial who told the jury that innocent people don't confess. He said that. He offered that as like a true statement when he knows it isn't. But he knew the jury might buy it because he knows that a lot of people are having trouble getting their head around the fact that people do. And the stats say that it happens with every murder conviction that involves a confession. It's coming out, the stats are that 1 in 4 of those confessions are false. 1 in 4 is a significant number. That's 25%. It's a heck of a lot, higher than 2 or 3 or 5%, right? So 25%, 1 in 4. Okay? That's a pretty significant number, in my opinion. So that's one thing that, Tom Fallon said. Another agent for the state misrepresenting, the truth.
To be on the safe side, we needed to put him up somewhere off of that property.
Did you have any feeling as to whether or not the defendant had told you everything that he knew at that time?
My feeling was no, he didn't. He knew more, because every time we would talk to him, he'd give you a little bit more, give you a little bit more.
I think what he meant was we could feed him a little bit more. Because anybody who watches that confession sees that all of the pertinent information came from the investigators, mainly through the questioning, honestly, because they used a lot of yes or no questions. And in asking a yes or no question, you convey a lot of information in the asking of it. So, anyways.
Did you make arrangements to re-interview the defendant?
We did, yes. That would take us to March 1st. At that point, we contacted Brendan's mother again, told her that we would like to take Brendan to the Manitowoc Sheriff's Department so we could do a videotaped interview with Brendan to see what else he maybe had known, see what else maybe he saw. It's obvious that he knew more than he was telling us.
I would say, Mark Wiegert, that he only knew what you and Fassbender told him. Okay? And I offer this as proof. November 6th interview with Deputy O'Neill. He's out of Marinette Sheriff's Office. Officer O'Neill is pretty aggressively, going at Brendan. But Brendan doesn't know what happened. He doesn't know anything. He's not able to say anything at the time. You know what else is interesting about that interview? Because obviously Brendan doesn't know anything. But the other thing that's interesting about it is that there was no information at the time. Because it was literally on November 6th. The bones hadn't been found. Most of the pertinent information in the case hadn't even been discovered yet. So there was literally nothing to feed him. Or at least they didn't know what to feed him because they didn't know what was going to end up being used. Or, whatever. And, determined to be, relevant. And all the various things that happen with evidence, right? So it's like the day after the RAV4 is found, they basically aren't willing to try to feed him stuff. Is the way I look at it, because they were aggressive enough that they actually on November 6th made a very distinct and clear promise in their desire to get Brendan to say something incriminating. They said, this is what they said. They told him, just to get him to say something incriminating, they told him, hey, look, I know you're scared. I know you're scared or whatever, and that you might go to jail. But I want to tell you right now that isn't going to happen. Just tell us what you know. Right? Brendan didn't really crack in the November 6th interview. He didn't know what to say because it hadn't been suggested to him. That's my opinion. And I think it's a good one because, like I said, they went as far as making a all-out promise. That promise, if they tried to use that confession, that promise would have held up on habeas. Without a doubt, it would have held up if it had been used at trial. But trust me, they don't want to use that one. Ken Kratz says that if they lost the March 1st interview, that there's others they could use, but the others are terrible. He overestimates, their value, in my opinion. All right. The next part we're going to move into is directly about Brendan, okay? And I want you to see what happens to somebody who buys the state's, story without question, okay? I just want to show you real quick what happens to somebody who just takes whatever the state says as the gospel and doesn't question it. I want you to see what that person, how they come off right here.
Trial, you put the tape of his confession in the VCR or DVD player and play it, and there's our case right there. So, yeah, it's a big victory today for us.
Have you seen the confession?
I haven't.
All right, so you see right there, obviously Michael Halbach completely believes Avery and Dassey are guilty. But when he makes that statement, he I think he shows more than he should have, or maybe than he wanted to, because it was obvious to me that he probably hadn't watched the confession when he was sitting there talking about popping it in and all that stuff, because he felt that it made the case so strong, right? I actually was wondering the same thing that the reporter who ends up asking him was thinking, which is, have you actually watched it, Mike? To which he answers no. He is offering a absolute 100% opinion that he is absolutely right, but hasn't even watched the confession. And he's claiming it's their case. So that's just again, where the state sets the Halbachs up. to not look the greatest, honestly, because to end up saying that, I mean, you're basically saying it's your whole case, but you haven't watched it. You don't know, you haven't checked it out. I would think I would, if it was my family member and it's supposedly the entire case against the person who did it. I don't know, maybe not everybody's like me, but I would probably be very interested in that. But he wasn't. But to be offering the opinions that he was offering were, it was very interesting considering that he hasn't actually watched it. So from there we move forward now into the present day, right? We all know that what's going on with the bones. They were remanded back to the circuit court. Now it was denied in the circuit court by Judge Sukowitz, and now it's on its way back to the Court of Appeals and all the issues and everything. But I've always been keen to point out the way that the state, when dealing with uncomfortable questions, would immediately conjure the hall box and be like talking about, oh well, we wouldn't do anything without the hall box being included in the decision, or we wouldn't want to do anything against the wishes of the hall box. And they would say things like that to avoid uncomfortable questions, particularly about Brendan when he was on his way through the federal courts, right? Whenever they were getting uncomfortable questions about Brendan, it was immediately all about the hall box. Oh, we respect the hall box, and da 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 da, and on and on and on, right? Then we skip forward to now, where the state is now telling the entire world, we gave them animal bones. Right? So let me play this clip and we'll come on back.
That's correct. They had 5 days to clean up.
I thought Investigator Wiegert did a tremendous job. And we've been praising the police all along. We love the police. The other family obviously doesn't. So, but yeah, we owe a lot to them for the work that they've done for my family and for Teresa.
So I guess I'm left kind of asking at this point, you were so quick to talk about, how the other family doesn't like the police, which I think is not exactly true with Brendan. Brendan was absolutely trying to please the investigators, and that's why his confession comes out the way it does. So I wouldn't say that was true with Brendan, which is who you're kind of talking about, but the thing is that now that you've seen how quickly the state, in an attempt to cover their own butt, are willing to tell the world they gave you animal bones and claim that they were Teresa's. I just wonder, do you still have the same warm and fuzzies about the law enforcement and the prosecutors and everything in this case? After all this has become an international scandal, do you still have all that faith in the investigation and all the things that have been pointed out about this investigation? Do you still have that unwavering faith in it? I'm just curious, really. But I think it was not I don't believe it's a correct statement to say that Brendan, as the other family, I don't believe Brendan, as part of the other family, hated law enforcement. Exactly the opposite. I feel like he was trying to please the investigators, as I said before. So, like I said, a lot of reasons why I believe the agents of the state of Wisconsin are just ridiculous and can't be believed. In a lot of ways, Brendan is my biggest piece of proof of that. Obviously AEDPA is helping Wisconsin keep a lid on this, but good luck with that, Wisconsin. Good luck. And Stephen's not doing so bad either, Wisconsin. 2 times remanded in one case. Yeah. So I think that this is going to get interesting moving forward here. Obviously, sometime in the next, I think, 50 or so days, 50, maybe 60 days, there should be something from Zellner filing her motion with the Court of Appeals. So that will then, require a response from the state. And then you will get another reply from Zellner about that. And then we'll be waiting for a decision to come out of the Court of Appeals after that point. But I think it's going to be interesting. I can't wait to see the way the state argues in that. I'm sure they won't be using the words procedural bar anywhere in it. So this ought to be interesting. But anyways, look, it's like I said, I feel bad for, the Hallbox because they've been duped by the state all along, and it's unfortunate, and the state is just trying, it's desperately trying to keep a lid on all of this. And like I said, AEDPA is helping them, but this may even burst out of those confines, or at least eventually the attention and the white hot spotlight will just eventually get to the point where they just break down and do what's right finally. So anyways, whichever one happens, whatever happens, whether it's KZ arguing successfully and getting Steven out, and Drizzy and Nyrider getting Brendan out, however it's end up happening, who knows, we'll have to see. But it looks to me like the state is running scared right now. That's really what it looks like to me anyways. So alright, if you haven't already, please hit subscribe. We'll see you.